Today we are going to read Human Physiology Unit 5 Digestion and Absorption. In the section Human Physiology, it includes 7 chapters, that is digestion and absorption, breathing and exchange of gases, body fluids and circulation, excretory products and their elimination, locomotion and movement, neural control and coordination, chemical coordination and integration. The reductionist approach to study of life forms resulted in increasing use of physico-chemical concepts and techniques. Majority of these studies employed either surviving tissue model or straight-away cell-free systems. An explosion of knowledge resulted in the molecular biology. Molecular physiology became almost synonymous with the biochemistry and the biophysics. However, it is now being increasingly realized that neither a purely organismic approach nor a purely reductionist molecular approach would reveal the truth about the biological processes or the living phenomena. System biology makes us believe that all living phenomena are emergent properties due to interaction among components of the system under study. Regulatory network of molecules, supramolecular assemblies, cells, tissues, organisms, and indeed population and communities each create emergent properties. In the chapter under this unit, major human physiological processes like digestion, exchange of gases, blood circulation, locomotion, and the movement are described in the cellular and molecular terms. The last two chapters point to coordination and the regulation of body events at the organismic level. Alfonso Corti, born in 1822 and died in 1888. Alfonso Corti, Italian anatomist, was born in 1822. Corti began his scientific career studying the cardiovascular system of reptiles. Later, he turned his attention to the mammalian auditory system. In 1851, he published a paper describing a structure located in the basilar membrane of cochlea containing hair cells that converts sound vibration into the nerve impulses, the organ of Corti. He died in the year 1888. Now we are going to read digestion and absorption. In this section, we will read digestive system, digestion of food, absorption of digested product, disorder of digestive system. Food is one of the basic requirements of all living organisms. The major component of our food are carbohydrate, protein, and the fat. Vitamins and the minerals are also required in small quantities. Food provides energy and organic material for growth and the repair of tissues. The water we take in plays an important role in metabolic processes and also prevents dehydration of the body. Biomacromolecules in food cannot be utilized by our body in their original form. They have to be broken down and converted into simple substances in the digestive system. The process of the conversion of complex food substances to the simple absorbable form is called digestion and is carried out by the digestive system by mechanical and the biochemical methods. General organization of human digestive system is in figure 16.1. Digestive system. The human digestive system consists of alimentary canal and the associated glands. Alimentary canal. The alimentary canal begins with an anterior opening the mouth and it opens out posteriorly through the anus. The mouth leads to the buccal cavity or the oral cavity. The oral cavity has a number of teeth and a muscular tongue. Each tooth has embedded in the socket of the jawbone, and this type of attachment is called thecodont. Majority of the mammals, including human beings, form two sets of teeth during their life, a set of temporary milk or deciduous teeth replaced by a set of permanent or adult teeth. This type of dentition is called diffeodont. An adult human, this is the figure. This is parotid gland and the pharynx and the oral cavity, mouth, submaxillary and the sublingual gland, esophagus, liver, gallbladder, stomach, pancreas, jejunum, descending colon, sigmoid colon, rectum, anus, vermiform appendix, cecum, ileum, ascending colon, transverse colon, duodenum. Okay. Has 32 permanent teeth, which are of 4 different types. Heterodont dentition, namely incisor, canine, premolar, and the molar. Arrangement of teeth in each half of the upper and the lower jaw in order incisor, canine, premolar, molar (ICPMM) is represented by a dental formula which in human is 2123 by 2123. The hard chewing surface of teeth made up of enamel helps in mastication of food. The tongue is a freely movable muscular organ attached to the floor of the oral cavity by the frenulum. The upper surface of the tongue has a small projection called papillae, some of which wear taste buds. The oral cavity leads into a short pharynx which serves as a common passage for food and the air. The esophagus and the trachea, that is windpipe, open into a pharynx. A cartilaginous flap called epiglottis prevents the entry of food into the glottis, opening of the windpipe during the swallowing. The esophagus is a thin, long tube which extends posteriorly, passing through the neck, thorax, and diaphragm, leads to a J-shaped bag. Bag-like structure called stomach. A muscular sphincter, that is gastroesophageal, regulates the opening of esophagus into stomach. The stomach, located in the upper left portion of the abdominal cavity, has four major parts: a cardiac portion into which the esophagus opens, a fundic region, embody the main central region, and the pyloric portion which opens into the first part of the small intestine. Small intestine is distinguishable into three regions: a C-shaped duodenum, a long coiled middle portion jejunum, and a highly coiled ileum. The opening of a stomach into the duodenum is guarded by the pyloric sphincter. Ileum opens into the large intestine. It consists of a cecum, colon, and the rectum. Cecum is a small, blind sac which hosts some symbiotic microorganism. A narrow finger-like tubular projection, the vermiform appendix, which is a vestigial organs, arises from the cecum. The cecum opens into the colon. The colon is divided into four parts: an ascending, a transverse, descending part, and a sigmoid colon. The descending part opens into the rectum, which opens out through the anus. The wall of alimentary canal from esophagus to the rectum poses four layers, namely serosa, muscularis, submucosa, and the mucosa. Serosa is the outermost layer and is made up of thin mesothelium, that is epithelium of visceral organs, with some connective tissues. Muscularis is formed by the smooth muscles usually arranged into an inner circular and an outer longitudinal layer. An oblique muscle layer may be present in some regions. The submucosal layer is formed of loose connective tissue containing nerves, blood, and the lymph vessels. In duodenum, glands are also present in the submucosa. The innermost layer lining the lumen of the alimentary canal is the mucosa. This layer forms the irregular folds ruggi in the stomach and the small finger-like foldings called villi in the small intestine. The cells lining the villi produce numerous microscopic projection called microvilli, giving a brush border appearance. This modification increases the surface area enormously. Villi are supplied with the network of capillaries and a large lymph vessels called the lacteal. Mucosal epithelium has goblet cells which secrete mucus that help in lubrication. Mucosa also form glands in the stomach, gastric glands, and the crypt in between bases of villi in the intestine, that is crypt of Leverkuhn. All the four layers show modification in different parts of the alimentary canal. Now digestive gland. The digestive gland associated with the alimentary canal include the salivary gland and the liver and the pancreas. Saliva is mainly produced by the three pairs of salivary glands: the parotids, that is cheek, the submaxillary, submandibular, that is lower jaw, and the sublingual, that is below the tongue. These glands situated just outside the buccal cavity and secrete salivary juices into the buccal cavity. Liver is the largest gland of the body, weighing about 1.2 to 1.5 kg in an adult human. It is situated in the abdominal cavity, just below the diaphragm, and has two lobes. The hepatic lobules are the structural and the functional unit of liver, containing hepatic cells arranged in the form of cords. Each lobule is covered by a thin connective tissue sheath called the Gleason's capsule, and the bile secreted by the hepatic cells passes through the hepatic ducts and is stored and concentrated in a thin muscular sac called the gallbladder, and the duct of gallbladder, that is cystic duct, along with the hepatic duct from the liver, forms the common bile duct. The bile duct and the pancreatic duct open together into the duodenum as the common hepatopancreatic duct, which is guarded by a sphincter called the sphincter of Oddi. The pancreas is a compound, both exocrine and endocrine, elongated organ situated between the limbs of the C-shaped duodenum, and the exocrine portion secretes an alkaline pancreatic juice containing enzymes, and the endocrine portion secretes hormones, insulin, and the glucagon. Digestion of foods. The process of digestion is accomplished by mechanical and the chemical processes. The buccal cavity performs two major functions, that is mastication of food and the facilitation of swallowing. The teeth and the tongue, with the help of saliva, masticate and mix up the food thoroughly. Mucus in the saliva helps in lubricating and adhering the masticated food particles into a bolus. The bolus is then conveyed into the pharynx and then into the esophagus by swallowing or degglutination. The bolus further passes down through the esophagus by the successive waves of the muscular contraction called peristalsis. The gastroesophageal sphincter controls the passage of food into the stomach. The saliva secreted into the oral cavity contains electrolytes, that is sodium, potassium, chlorine, and the bicarbonate, and the enzymes, salivary amylase, and the lysosomes. The chemical process of digestion is initiated in the oral cavity by the hydrolytic action of the carbohydrate splitting enzyme, that is the salivary amylase. About 30% of a starch is hydrolyzed by this enzyme, optimum pH 6.8, into a disaccharide maltose. Lysozyme present in the saliva act as an antibacterial agent that prevents the infections, that is starch in the presence of salivary amylase at pH 6.8 converted into a disaccharide, that is maltose. The mucosa of stomach has gastric glands. Gastric glands have the three major types of cells. First, mucous neck cells which secrete mucus. Second, peptic or the cheap cells which secrete proenzyme pepsinogens. And the third, parietal or oxygentic cells which secrete HCl and the intrinsic factor, that is factor essential for the absorption of vitamin B12. The stomach stores the food for 4 to 5 hours. The food mixes thoroughly with the acidic gastric juice of the stomach by the churning movement of its muscular wall and is called chyme. The proenzyme pepsinogens on exposure to hydrochloric acid gets converted into an active enzyme pepsin. The proteolytic enzymes of the stomach. Pepsin converts proteins into proteoses and the peptones, that is peptides. The mucus and the bicarbonate present in the gastric juices play an important role in lubrication and protection of the mucosal epithelium from the excoriation by the highly concentration hydrochloric acid. HCl provides the acidic pH, that is pH is 1.8, optimal for the pepsins. Renin is a proteolytic enzyme found in the gastric juice of infants which help in the digestion of milk proteins. A small amount of the lipases are also secreted by the gastric glands. Various types of the movement are generated by the muscularis layer of the small intestine. These movements help in the through mixing up of the food with the various secretion in the intestine and thereby facilitate the digestion. The bile, pancreatic juice, and the intestinal juice are the secretion released into the small intestine. Pancreatic juice and the bile are released through the hepatopancreatic duct. The pancreatic juice contains inactive enzymes, that is trypsinogens, chymotrypsinogens, procarboxypeptidases, amylases, lipases, and the nucleases. Trypsinogen is activated by an enzyme enterokinase secreted by the intestinal mucosa into an active trypsin, which in turn activates the other enzyme in the pancreatic juice. The bile released into the duodenum contains bile pigments, that is bilirubin and the biliverdin, bile salts, cholesterol, and the phospholipids, but no enzymes. Bile helps in emulsification of fats, that is breakdown of fats into a very small micelles. Bile also activates lipases. The intestinal mucosal epithelium has goblet cell which secrete the mucus. The secretions of the brush border cells of the mucosa along with the secretion of the goblet cell constitute the intestinal juice or the succus entericus. This juice contains a variety of enzymes like disaccharidases, that is example maltase, dipeptidases, lipases, nucleosidases, etc. The mucus along with the bicarbonates from the pancreas protect the intestinal mucosa from acid as well as provide an alkaline medium, that is pH is equal to 7.8 for an enzymatic activities. Submucosal glands, that is Brunner's glands, also help in this. Proteins, proteoses, and the peptones, partially hydrolyzed proteins in the chyme reaching the intestine, are acted upon by the proteolytic enzymes of the pancreatic juice as given below. That is proteins, peptones, proteoses in the presence of trypsin, chymotrypsin on carboxypeptidases, it converted into dipeptides. Carbohydrate in the chyme are hydrolyzed by the pancreatic amylase into disaccharides. Polysaccharides or starch in the presence of amylase, it is converted into disaccharides. Fats are broken down by the lipases with the help of bile into the di and the monoglycerides. Fats in the presence of lipases, it converted into diglycerides, and after that it gets converted into monoglycerides. Nucleases in the pancreatic juice acts on nucleic acid to form nucleotides and the nucleosides. Nucleic acid, by the help of nucleases, it get converted into nucleotides and after that it converted into nucleosides. The enzymes in the succus entericus acts on the end product of the above reaction to form a respective simple absorbable forms, and this final step of indigestion occur very close to the mucosal epithelial cells of the intestine. Here, dipeptides in the presence of dipeptidases get converted into amino acid. Maltose in the presence of maltase it gets converted into glucose and glucose. Lactose in the presence of lactase is converted into glucose and galactose. Sucrose in the presence of sucrase is converted into glucose and fructose. Nucleotidases in the presence of nucleotides in the presence of nucleotidases get converted into nucleosides, and nucleosides in the presence of nucleosidases get converted into the sugars and the bases. Di and the monoglyceride in the presence of lipases is get converted into fatty acids and the glycerol. The breakdown of the biomacromolecules mentioned above occurs in the duodenum region of the small intestine, and the simple substances thus formed are absorbed in the jejunum and the ileum region of the small intestine. The undigested unabsorbed substances are passed on to the large intestine. No significant digestive activity occur in the large intestine. The function of large intestine are absorption of some water, minerals and the certain drugs, secretion of mucus which help in the adhering the waste that is undigested particles together and lubricating it in for an easy passage. The undigested unabsorbed substances called the feces enter the cecum of the large intestine through the ileocecal valve which prevent the backflow of the fecal matter. It is temporarily stored in the rectum till defecation. The activities of the gastrointestinal tract are under the neural and the hormonal control for the proper coordination of the different parts. The sight, the smell, and the presence of food in the oral cavity can stimulate the secretion of saliva. Gastric and intestinal secretion are also similarly stimulated by the neural signals. The muscular activities of different part of alimentary canal can also be moderated by the neural mechanism, both local and through CNS. Hormonal control of the secretion of digestive juices is carried out by the local hormone produced by the gastric and intestinal mucosa. Absorption of digested products. Absorption is the process by which the end product of the digestion pass through the intestinal mucosa into the blood or lymph. It is carried out by the passive, active or facilitated transport mechanism. A small amount of the monosaccharide like glucose, amino acid and the some electrolyte like chloride ions are generally absorbed by the simple diffusion. The passage of these substances into the blood depends upon the concentration gradients. However, some substances like glucose and amino acid are absorbed with the help of carrier proteins. This mechanism is called the facilitated transport. Transport of water depends upon the osmotic gradient. Active transport occurs against the concentration gradient and hence required energy. Various nutrients like amino acid, monosaccharide like glucose, electrolyte like sodium are absorbed into the blood by this mechanism. Fatty acid and the glycerol being insoluble cannot be absorbed into the blood. They are first incorporated into the small droplet called micelles, which move into the intestinal mucosa. They are reformed into a very small protein-coated fat globules called the chylomicrons, which are transported into the lymph vessels, that is lacteals, in the villi. These lymph vessels ultimately release the absorbed substances into the blood stream. Absorption of substances take place in the different part of the alimentary canal like mouth, stomach, small intestine, large intestine. However, maximum absorption occurs in the small intestine. A summary of absorption site of absorption and substances absorbed is the table. The summary of absorption in different part of digestive system. First of all, in the mouth. Certain drugs coming in contact with the mucosa of mouth and the lower side of the tongue are absorbed into the blood capillaries lining them. Second, stomach. Absorption of water, simple sugars and the alcohol takes place. Small intestine. Principal organ for absorbing of nutrients. The digestion is completed here. The final product of digestion such as glucose, fructose, fatty acid, glycerol and the amino acid are absorbed through the mucosa into the blood stream and the lymph. Large intestine. Absorption of water, some minerals and the drugs takes place. The absorbed substances finally reach the tissues which utilize them for their activities, and the process is called assimilation. The digestive wastage solidified into coherent phases into the rectum initiate a neural reflex causing an urge or a desire for its removal. The ejection of feces to the outside through the anal opening, that is defecation, is a voluntary process and is carried out by the mass peristalsis movement. Disorder of digestive system. The inflammation of the intestinal tract is the most common ailment due to the bacterial or the viral infections, and the infections are also caused by the parasitic of the intestine like tapeworm, roundworm, threadworm, hookworm, pinworm, etc. Jaundice. The liver is affected. Skin and eyes turn yellow due to the deposit of bile pigments. Vomiting. It is the ejection of stomach contents through the mouth. The reflex action is controlled by the vomit center in the medulla. A feeling of nausea precedes vomiting. Now diarrhea. The abnormal frequency of the bowel movement and the increased liquidity of the fecal discharge is known as diarrhea. It reduces the absorption of food. Constipation. In constipation, the feces are retained within the colon as the bowel movement occur irregularly. Indigestion. In this condition, the food is not properly digested, leading a feeling of fullness, and the cause of indigestion are inadequate enzyme secretion and anxiety, food poisoning, overeating, and the spicy food. PEM, protein energy malnutrition. Dietary deficiency of protein and total food calories are widespread in the many underdeveloped countries of South and the Southeast Asia, South America, and the West and the Central Africa. Protein energy malnutrition (PEM) may affect large sections of population during the drought, famine, and political turmoil. This happened in Bangladesh during the Liberation War and in Ethiopia during the severe drought in the mid-80s. PEM affects infants and the children to produce marasmus and the kwashiorkor. Marasmus is produced by a simultaneous deficiency of protein and the calories. It is found in infants less than a year in the age. If mother's milk is replaced too early by the other foods which are poor in the both proteins and the calorific value, this often happens if the mother has the second pregnancy or the childbirth when the older infant is still too young. In marasmus, protein deficiency impairs growth and replacement of tissue proteins. Extreme emaciation of the body and the thinning of limbs result, and the skin becomes dry, thin, and wrinkled. Growth rate and the body weight decline considerably. Even growth and development of brain and mental facilities are impaired. Kwashiorkor is produced by the protein deficiency unaccompanied by the calorie deficiency. It results from the replacement of mother milk by a high calorie, low protein diet in a child more than 1 year in the age. Like marasmus, kwashiorkor shows wasting of muscles, thinning of limbs, failure of growth, and the brain development. But unlike marasmus, some fat is still left under the skin. Moreover, extensive oedema and swelling of body parts are seen. Summary. The digestive system of human consists of an alimentary canal and the associative digestive gland. The alimentary canal consists of the mouth, buccal cavity, pharynx, esophagus, stomach, small intestine, large intestine, rectum, and the anus. The accessory digestive gland include the salivary gland, the liver with the gallbladder, and the pancreas. Inside the mouth, the teeth masticates the food, the tongue tastes the food, and the manipulates it for proper mastication by the mixing with the saliva. Saliva contains a starch digestive enzyme, salivary amylase, that digests the starch and convert into a maltose disaccharide. The food then passes into the pharynx and enter the esophagus in the form of bolus, which is further carried down through the esophagus by peristalsis into the stomach. In the stomach, mainly protein digestion takes place. Absorption of simple sugars, alcohol, and medicines also takes place in the stomach. The chyme, that is food, enter into the duodenum portion of the small intestine and is acted on by the pancreatic juice, bile, and finally by the enzyme in the succus entericus. So the digestion of carbohydrate, proteins, and the fats is completed. The food then enters into the jejunum and the ileum portion of the small intestine. Carbohydrates are digested and converted into monosaccharide like glucose. Proteins are finally broken down into amino acid, and the fats are converted to fatty acid and the glycerol. The digested products are absorbed into the body through the epithelial lining of the small intestinal villi. The undigested food feces enter into the cecum of the large intestine through the ileocecal valve, which prevent backflow of the fecal matter. Most of the water is absorbed in the large intestine, and the undigested food becomes semi-solid in nature and then enters into the rectum, anal canal, and finally digested out through the anus.